Croydon Advertiser Sports Bar Fan Predictor.
This evening we're joined by you, the fans.
Hi, I'm Ollie and I'm a Palace fan.
My name's Louis, I've been a Palace fan for 21 years.
For your chance to have your say on all things Crystal Palace.
Cardew is the best appointment we could have made.
How can Jagielka get into the England squad and not Scott Dan?
My midfield would be Yala, Wilf, Punch, Jelinek.
Come on, Palace.
To be a fan predictor, tweet at AYT96 to get involved.
I want to talk about Reece Alassani first, because there was a lot of hype around Reece Alassani, and he kind of gone away a little bit really over the last year or so. You haven't really heard as much as we did maybe in that championship season. What's happened to Reece really?
And I've seen a lot of Reece because when I first, until this season, when I was watching the under-18s, the under-16s would play on the adjacent pitch. So every time the ball would go out of play, you would turn around and it was easy to pick who the superstars were. At one time, you see this little blonde kid just running the game, which was Johnny Williams. And then Alassani was a superstar at under-16s level. You could easily see him because of his sideshow style, Bob from The Simpsons Hair. But he was just going past people, scoring for fun. And you think, oh, well, how's he going to step up with the under-18s? And as usual, with the players that are really outstanding under-16s, like Johnny Williams and Scannell and people like that, and with Alassani, they tend to step them up about a year early to under-18s to see how they go. And Reece struggled a little bit because of his, initially thought because of his size. He's a bit small. He was probably a little bit more physically immature and maybe a little bit more emotionally immature than some of the lads as well. Some of the lads you see, they're almost men at 15, 16. Some are still 15, 16-year-olds. And you just thought, well, give him time, he'll adapt. But he's never really seemed to have adapted. And I don't know whether it's a little bit of a case of physical development. I've seen him recently in under 21s and he's 19 now and he still gets just pushed around. And I don't know whether it's almost a case of too much too soon because the club publicised that because there were other teams after him, including Arsenal, which is the team he supports and he goes to watch a lot, they gave him the most lucrative contract they've ever given to a under 16 or 17-year-old when they can sign their pro deal. And maybe it's a combination of thinking he's made it too soon, not physically being developed enough when you start to 18s football. And 18s football compared to 16s is like men and boys. 16 you can still get away and be a good player with the body of a boy. In the 18s it really becomes man's football. There's some huge, supposedly lads, but they make grown men look small. And he really struggled. He says the odd game where he'll get the ball and beat 4 men and score. And the fans that don't see it regularly will just see a clip of that on YouTube or on the Palace channel and think, wow, what a player. But they won't realise that for the other 85 minutes he hasn't touched the ball and he hasn't touched the ball for the last 4 games and then he'll suddenly do a bit of magic. Well, that's not good enough or if you want to make it to the top. And if I was a betting man now, I would say that when his contract is, I think it comes to the end of next season, I think it'd be one of those that falls by the wayside. He could bounce back and make it, but it could be a case of it might be mid to late 20s before he has got the physique to cope with it. And we had a case with that with a guy called James Dayton, who was a superstar.
Playing in Scotland now.
He was given a big contract at 16, was going to be a star, had all the tricks, but just they put him on all the the protein shakes and the weight gain and stuff.
Everything.
Just couldn't get it. And he was released.
Because he had trials before he went to Palace, he had trials at Man U and Spurs and people like that. I actually knew someone that knew him personally, and he said he was just really always just too nervous to do that. And he went to Palace and things didn't work out. But he did really well in Scotland. I think he came back, then he went to Oldham.
He did. Well,
I think he's back out in Scotland.
I worked with friends of the family and at the time, and he actually became disenchanted and dropped out of football for a while. And then he went to the Glen Hoddle Academy as almost like a last resort in Spain, I think they were based. And he did really well there. And I think it was Kilmarnock picked him up. And there was some haggling between, because the academy, Hoddle's Academy, getting their money back by selling players. They actually pay the players and cover all the costs. So the only way they make money is to sell them. I believe his father had to step in, and there was Hoddle Academy wanted X and Kilmarnock only wanted to play Y, but he made his debut, I think, in front of 40,000 at Rangers and won a penalty. So he's gone from one extreme to the other. Then he joined Oldham last season, and I think he's on loan back at St Mirren at the moment.
Because he did start well at Oldham, and then it sort of fizzled out. But he's back in Scotland. I think, and he's got a really big beard now. In his first game back in Scotland, I think he scored a goal, or got an assist, or something like that.
So I can see that being Alassani. Alassani's got all the talent, but it's just, has he got the killer desire that you need? And is he going to have the physique to cope with men's football? Is a big question mark still.
It's strange, though, isn't it? Because he was obviously linked with so many people. £1 million being branded around in the press. Whether it ever got anywhere near that, who knows?
Yeah.
But still, to be touted as a £1 million player, it's almost like Lee Hills. Lee Hills, supposedly £2 million offers and things like that, and now he's working in recruitment.
Yeah, and he plays for Whitehall, doesn't he? Who
Yeah.
I've heard through the grapevine are paying big money for a non-league club, and they're in the promotion shake-up in the Conference South at the moment. And Lee actually, he's best friends with, or was Kieran Gibbs. He was in the Women Academy with them and stuff. But he was England Youth International, wasn't he? Big things.
He was great.
But at least he played some first-team football, Lee,
Yeah.
where Reece... is he going to or not? And to be honest, he got substituted today for the under-21s. Start of the season, he wasn't even starting for the under-21s at Palace, which isn't a great standard.
No.
The under-21s league. If you're decent now, you're getting loaned out to a league club. You're not playing in the under-21s league. And it's only after Christmas that he's actually started regularly for our under-21s. So he's 19 now, so it shows how far he's still got to go.
Such a shame, really, isn't it? But talking about loaning players, we've got Jerome Williams on loan. I think he's at Southend, the left back. He looked really good in pre-season when we didn't have any left backs. I think there's a few people blind faithfully saying, "Oh, go on, give him a go in the Premier League." But how far is he away from playing for Palace, really? Because he's impressed on his loan. We don't really have a left back. Well, Fry's has forgotten his boots, and Suarez seems to just foul everyone, or whatever. How far away is Williams?
There's quite a bit of talk about his position, because all through the Palace Academy, he's a massive lad for a left back, and he's got the natural physique for a centre back. And I went to one game where he'd actually broken into England under-17s and got the odd cap. And there was an England scout at one game, just got talking to by accident. And he mentioned it and said, they'd actually asked Palace, the club, why don't you play him at centre-back? Why don't you have a look at him? And Palace at the time said, no, he only wants to play left-back because he's such a good attacking force. Half of his game, he's really good at all the tricks and surging forward, which you can do much easier from full-back than centre-back. And when he went to Southend, left-back. But more recently, he's been playing centre-back for them.
Oh, right, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then he got dropped for a period, and I think he might have just forced his way back in the team, or he might still be dropped. So I think he now sees himself more as a centre-back than a left-back, and he has got the size, he has definitely got the size and physique for it. But again, it's a big step up, isn't it?
Yeah,
from
if he's going to
Southend.
break into the Palace team, it's going to be at left back, not centre back.
Yeah, and I think now he's one who is a local lad, so it's lovely to see local lads make it. I think his family's from Thornton Heath, and it's great when you get somebody who's really local break into the team. He'd have the support of everyone. But he's one of those players where it's going to be so hard in the Premiership. I think I read a stat somewhere that the average age of a Premiership debutant is something like 22, and in the Championship it's 18 to 19.
Yeah.
So it shows how much more difficult it is. So it's one of those where if we're in the Championship, he might have a chance maybe next season of starting games. If we're in the Premiership, I don't think he's going to. It's just that extra quality that's provided, and they're not going to take a chance on a young player when we've got all this TV money and so much depends on staying up in the Premiership to fund the new ground, etc., etc. So he's one of those. I think they'll either look to maybe cash in on him and sell him to a Championship or League One club, or at least put him out on a season-long loan again next year. I don't think he'd be ready for the Premiership.
No. We were talking about Johnny there. Johnny Williams, that is. You said you could tell from the start how good he was going to be, but it's been a tough few years really for Johnny with injuries and things like that, and he's found himself now back on loan for the third time at Ipswich. Can you ever see him really making it at the top level? I think ability-wise, yes. But if he keeps getting hit by injuries, if he can't play 30, 40 games a season, surely he's never going to get a proper run in a Premier League team.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. It's funny because when he's 16, you see this tiny little blonde top amongst a land of 16-year-old giants just running the ball, running all over the pitch with the ball, and nobody could get near him. He didn't really have to pass much to his own team either. He just dribbled around all the oppo. And again, when he was moved up to under-18s early, and unlike Alessani, he took to it like a duck to water. He was the best player within a couple of games of stepping up to the 18s. And they didn't play him for more about a season at the 18s, and they're already pushing him into, I'm not sure if it was reserves then or under-21 football, and then in the first team. So they obviously felt so, really highly of him. But I think like one of our more recent managers, might have been Pulis, said, where do you play him? He's a brilliant footballer, but in the modern game, where does he fit in? He's not a winger. He's not probably a support forward because he doesn't score enough goals. Not number 10, and to be a sort of Premier League central midfielder, you know,
You need height.
you need
power,
height, you need
tackle.
power and tackle. You need to be good at all aspects of the game.
I
You
think the
can't just be
Pardew
good at
regime might help him a little bit from that respect, that he might try and squeeze him in somewhere. I don't think there's any chance he was ever going to get in a Tony
that.
Pulis team.
No, that's
Unless
true.
it was out on the wing. Pardew might help that, but it is so true, isn't it? Because he, you know, what is it? For me, he's a box-to-box midfielder,
Yes.
probably.
Yeah, I
But then
agree.
when you've got Joe Ledley at 6'1", probably 6'2", power, presence, he just brings that little bit more for you, doesn't he? You could see Johnny coming on and trying to make an impact.
And the guy we signed from Bolton might also, when he's fit, over his broken shin,
Mhm.
I think that's going to make it harder for Johnny Williams to get near our first team, because I think he'll be ahead of him in the pecking order as well. Yeah, I've got friends who are Ipswich season ticket holders, and they absolutely love him. He's the best footballer we've got on our books. He gives us that something that the other members of the squad can't give us, just that extra touch of quality, the ability to create something out of nothing. So maybe it's best for Johnny, as much as, you know, it caused a few tears amongst the Palace fans, it might be best for his career to actually go and join Ipswich, say, permanently,
could
where
almost
he's going
see
to
him-
play every week, and
You
they
could
love
almost-
him.
Yeah, you could almost see him fitting in that football limbo in between the Premier League
Yeah.
and the Championship, can't you? You know, where you're too good for the Championship, but not quite Premier League week in, week out standard. You can almost see him sort of getting in there and then sitting in there for a few years, which is sad because his abilities, obviously, you know, it's there on paper, but
The best I think he'll be if we're in the Premiership would be an impact sub, the sort
Yeah.
of guy you'd be on with 15 minutes to go, you're chasing the game, or defence is time, you just tell him to sort of play off the forward, get the ball and just
Yeah.
run at the defence,
Hustle, yeah.
run at the defence, win us free kicks, penalties, stuff like that. But he's not going to start games, is he, in the Premiership, I don't think.
no. And Sally Kaikai has been on loan at Cambridge, and I think he's been doing pretty well. He scored for Palace this season in the Cup against Newcastle when Alan Pardew was there. Again, it's just so tough now, isn't it, being a Premier League side, trying to think that these youth guys are going to get a chance. I think having Pardew, and even Warnock before that, Warnock was always like to give a youth player a chance. But it's just so tough to see, you know, is this player ever going to get really a chance to play for Palace in the first team? I think if they were, they'd probably be lighting up League Two right now. You know, he's done well, but he's probably got to rip it up at this stage to really get a chance for Palace over the next couple of
I
years.
agree. I think if we're in the Championship, he'd probably be one of our bench players now,
Yeah.
and that would, you know, and that would keep him happy. I think you've hit the nail on the head. In the Premiership now, the danger we've got is we're competing locally with Millwall and Charlton academies. Millwall's 3 miles away from ours. Charlton is 7 miles. They're all Category 2 at the moment. Charlton have just put in planning permission to do the building work on their ground to turn it into Academy 1. So if you're the father of a promising youngster now, and he's coming up 13, 10, 12, and you'll have offers. If he's that good, he's going to be offered by Palace, Charlton and Millwall, and you don't want to travel to North London if you want to stay local. You're not going to go to Palace because
you're not going to get a chance.
you're not going to get a chance. You have more chance of getting into the Millwall and Charlton team. Charlton Academy is probably going to be Category 1, so you'll be playing regularly against, you know, your Arsenals and your West Hams and your Fulhams and your Southamptons, rather than Category 2 at under 18 level. You're playing against Bristol City and Huddersfield and Millwall and Coventry.
Not so attractive.
Not so
is it?
attractive. And Palace aren't the sort of team that's going to throw the money at
No.
the under 18 players like your Chelsea or Tottenham. So if you're chasing the money, you'll go to Chelsea or Tottenham if your lad's that good. If you're chasing a chance to play in the first team, you'll go to Millwall or Charlton. Charlton have blooded about 3 of their academy lads this
They've
this
had quite
year.
a few, haven't they?
And they've got a
really?
really good crop, and it looks like they're going to win our division again for the second year at under 18 level. And so this could be a long-term thing, not just for Kakai, but for others as well. Kakai, we owe a lot to Fisher Athletic. We got him from Fisher, we got Jerome Williams from Fisher, we got Ryan Innes from Fisher.
Right.
And so they've all come from that way. He was an out-and-out centre forward when he arrived, very cool finisher, very calm, collected, quite a quiet lad. But they converted him to a winger.
As they do
As
in
they
the
do.
modern day.
But he's not really a winger. He's a player who likes to cut inside and shoot. And he takes a mean free kick. He's really good.
I've seen it,
anything
yeah.
20, 25 yards out. And it's always the same free kick. It's over the top of the wall, into the top corner of the side behind the wall.
Yeah.
And he's an expert at it. But even at Cambridge, he's not starting games. He's now
No.
sub and coming on most games. And I thought if you're going to be that good, you would be at least starting games.
Yeah.
So he's another one that I feel getting to the gap that you described, and he won't play for us right in the Premiership, but he might make a career in the early years at, say, League One and League Two, and ultimately maybe in the Championship. But he's another one who I don't think will probably play Premier football in his career.
You said he came from Fisher like Ryan Innes did. He's obviously been, I think he's been on loan at Yeovil, maybe Port Vale more recently.
Yes.
He picked up an injury, he was impressing there, but again, we seem to be really, really negative at the moment, but you can just see him as he's been on the Palace books for so long. I think he's captained them at every single youth level. But again, where's Ryan Innes' career? Because they looked like at one point under the Freedman era that we had no centre backs, and we thought he was going to get his chance, and he didn't. But he's not really getting any younger at this point, and it seems mad to be writing people off at 19, 20 years old. But is he going to be a Premier League footballer?
No, sadly, definitely not. I think he peaked when he was 16, 17. When he was
massive
he was
wasn't he?
England under 17 captain when he was 16. He got moved up early to the under 18s. They used him as a centre forward whenever they were chasing games.
Yeah.
He loved to fight, almost too literally.
He reminded me of a Paddy McCarthy.
Yes,
that's exactly what he reminded me of.
And he'd get into running battles. I went to, the ball would be down the other end, and he and the centre forward would be kicking each other off the ball, having little rabbit punches at each other. But he could play, and he was quite sharp then at 16, 17. He had the height, but he still had the sort of lithe physique that lads have before they fill out. Then over one summer, he filled out, so he gained the body to go with his physique, made him a huge unit, which for a year or half a year he really struggled with, because it made him so much more immobile.
Yeah.
And in the air he was really good, but on the floor, if they got the floor and he had to turn and chase, the forward would be gone before he could do it. Then after about 9 to 12 months, he grew into his body almost. But he's still, because of his sheer size and physique, he's not mobile enough to play a modern passing Premier centre-back football. The old school football, where the centre-back's job is to physically bully his centre-forward and to head the ball away 50 times, he can do that. So I can see him making a career for himself, definitely in the lower leagues, where the physical battle matters as much as your footballing ability. But at the top level, where you've got to almost be a footballer as well, a bit like Scott Dan is, where he's good in the air, but you also have to be
most underrated centre back in the Premier League, because technical ability
is so high.
Well, Joe Ledley said he's the best technical footballer in the whole of the team.
So high. And yes, I've been watching Palace 40 years, and he's one of the best centre backs we've ever had in the 40 years that I've ever seen.
Amazing, isn't it?
But Ryan, sadly, will make a lower league centre back. I don't think he'll make a Premiership centre back, just because of his sheer size and physique and his relative lack of speed and mobility that you need to play at the top level these days. And there was rumours that Port Vale, before he broke, I think he's broken his ankle or something, they actually made a permanent offer.
Oh, right.
And I'm not sure if he's out of contract this year or next year, but Palace were chewing it over as to whether to cash in their chips now almost and sell him. And have an add-on clause in there in case he ever does bounce back and make it a top level, or whether to give it maybe another year and see if he develops further. But
what would you do?
I must admit, I'd probably cash in now. There's younger centre backs coming up. They deserve chances in the under 21s and things. Give them a chance.
I think it gives them the best opportunity to actually go on and make a career as well. You even see it from that kind of standard. When you've grown up and he's grown up with Palace his whole life. We've seen a lot of him. I want him to go and have a solid career, and I don't think that's with Palace. So I think if we could give him, if he gets the opportunity now to go and play football, I think it's the best for him. That's what I think we should let him do.
I agree, because I've been to quite a few under 21 games in the last few months, and the standard is poor. And so it's almost, the idea of the under 21 league was a good one to try and bridge that gap between 18s football before the guys make their first team debut. But I think the standard is just so poor, which is shown by the amount of clubs who are keen to loan their players out of that age group rather than to keep them playing in the under 21 league.
We sent loads. First thing Pulis did when he came in, he just said nobody's been loaned out. Just literally loaned everybody out.
And I just think that doesn't help his developments. If he's going to develop now, I think he must be 20 now, maybe. He needs to be playing first team football regularly rather than stuck in the under 21s to Palace, hoping that he might eventually make the first team, which he won't if we're in the Premiership. So maybe it's best all round for the club and for him, as you say, his development, that he joins a club and plays every week and becomes a leader.
We had a couple of lads signed at centre half from Dulwich Hamlet. I think one was Quay Taylor. I think he's gone now, isn't he?
He plays for Bolton under 21s now with Freeman.
Took him. And the other one's Michael Chambers, who supposedly the next god of centre backs. I think turned down Manchester United supposedly, but he's sort of gone extremely quiet. I remember him taking some time out to do something at school.
He had exams. I think he's quite a bright lad. He's had quite a few growth pains and injuries through his growth pains, because he's a huge lad. I think he's about 6'5". One of my good friends is the reporter for Welling, and he went on loan there early in the season in the conference, and they're really struggling now. They're very poor compared to the other clubs in the conference financially, and I think they've barely won a game since Christmas. They're in the relegation zone. He's joined them on loan again for the rest of the season, and his contract runs out at the end of the season, and I'm pretty sure, I'm 99.9% certain that it won't be renewed by the club.
Yeah.
So we've seen the last of him in a Palace shirt, and to be honest, Conference South and Conference is probably the level he's gonna play at. So he's one of those
So
levels
strange, isn't it, though,
he'll
to
make
see
money.
someone linked with Manchester United and then spend a career in sort of in the lower leagues,
Yeah.
League Two maybe at a peak. That's
Just shows that some players do peak at 16, 17, and don't get any better, and then you've got others that you don't look twice at 16, 17. They've done nothing. You think they're sure to be released, like Zaha. Couldn't even get a game for under 18s for a year and a half, and only started to get a game because Pinney went on loan, and as the club have admitted, they came so close to releasing him so many times. All of a sudden he's gone from being this lad who used to look sorry for himself, being subbed for the under 18s, just doing tricks at half time with the ball on his own on the pitch, and maybe getting 2 minutes at the end of the game, to being the best player in the team within 6 weeks.
Imagine if we ended up with Pinney rather than Zaha now.
And Pinney's, I just read, Pinney's one of those players, if he could have got himself fit, could have made a career in the lower leagues, League One, League Two. But he's always enjoyed himself too much, and he's just signed, extended. He's bounced around. He's at Eastbourne Borough now, and they love him. And he's just signed a contract until the end of next year with them. And another one of the lads that we released last year, a centre back, Kieran Kinder-John, is playing for them as well. So he's playing Conference South now, which, given his level of dedication and every club he joins, we just need to get him a bit fitter, but he never seems to get that bit fitter. It's probably the level he's going to remain at.
Oh, that's a shame. You spoke about peaking at quite a late level there, and Kwesi Appiah kind of just finally at 24, maybe finding his feet, but he wasn't really even setting League Two on fire, and then managed to get called up by Ghana, and now there's a little bit of hype around him. This loan at Reading now is probably make or break for Appiah, really, isn't it? If he can score some goals there, then the potential's there. And we were thinking earlier on in the season that when we went to Southampton away, if Appiah was in the squad, or if he was under 21, he would have been on that bench, definitely.
Yeah, his age counted against him, didn't it? Because he's 24. But I think the club had just renewed his contract for 2 years, extended. And I saw him recently, and it was almost like a before and after the African nations. Before, he was just plodding along. You think, he's never going to make a Premiership. He might make this, might make that. And he was playing on League One, League Two loans. And then he came back, and I saw him in the under-21s recently. He scored a hat-trick in 60 minutes. He was head and shoulders above every other player on the pitch. And they took him off after about 60 minutes, or he could have scored probably 5 or 6. And he just looked a different player. He scored a lovely curl from the edge of the area. He was dictating play, holding the ball up, clever runs, scoring all sorts of goals. And I just think now this is wonderful for him, because I really do think that he could be, whisper it, that maybe not the Ian Wright, but that sort of story where he comes late to senior football, doesn't really start making a name to his mid-20s. But as you say now, he's got to prove he can do it in the Championship. And I think if he does well between now and the end of the season for Reading, we'll loan him on a season-long loan, I think, next year to a Championship club. And he's got the opportunity then to go and maybe score, if he scores 20 goals in a season in the Championship, then we're going to hang on to him, and he might get a chance in the Premier if he keeps developing.
It seemed like Glenn Murray. Glenn Murray couldn't get a contract to Carlisle, a few years ago, and then he went to Brighton, scored a couple of goals, and then he left them really badly, which was great for us. Obviously, he's 31 and he's finally getting his chance in the Premier League, so it doesn't necessarily happen overnight, and I'm good luck to him. I hope he can do it. I don't necessarily think he will play Premier League football. I've seen quite a bit of him. I don't think he will, but I'd love him to definitely make a career in the Championship. I think that could be his level. Yeah,
and so that's still a great story to come up from where he was.
He was playing at Thurrock and people like that, and Margate and people. That's mad. But we saw Boateng, Hiram Boateng, maybe a couple of years ago under Holloway away at Stoke in the Cup, and right, blimey, he's going to be good. He's about 16 or 17 at that time, with a beard and about 6'5" and just a unit. I was thinking, oh my god, he's my age. I think I'm probably the most positive about this one, about playing at the top level. I think he scored that amazing goal that went completely viral. But I think he's got great potential in terms of the Palace youth.
I think he has. Well, I agree with you on that one. I've had a vested interest in Hiram because one of my best friends was his PE teacher at school. Right. And he said it used to frustrate him that Hiram was such a lovely lad, and he was always the second best player in the school. The best player was on Spurs' books. Right. But Hiram was a sort who'd always come out and help the lesser players, train all the lads. The Tottenham lad didn't want to know. It was all big time already at sort of 15, 16. And Hiram, I've seen great strides. I hadn't seen him for about 6 months until I've seen him a few times recently under 21s. And in the last 6 months, he's made huge strides. He used to be one of those players who would play it safe, a bit like the Ray Wilkins, side to side, never lost the ball, but never tried anything over ambitious. very good at short passing, never out of position playing, quite deep in midfield. But now he drives forward with the ball. That goal that you see on YouTube, I think it was away at Colchester where he beats Bill. That's not untypical of what he's been doing. He's been dribbling past people. He's been banging 40-yard passes.
I think when you saw him in that Stoke game, you could tell he wasn't that type of player. Obviously, he's not going to be as confident as he, as a player is because he is 16 playing at Stoke on a Tuesday night. It's not easy, but you could just tell he wasn't that type of player. And starting to see him advance, if he can bring that to his game. That's a really good midfielder you got in there, strong, good on the ball, and can go forward. To me, that's signs of a top Championship Premier League player.
He's another one I think they'll look to loan out to a Championship club now because he's outgrown the under-21s. When I've seen him recently, he's been almost the best player on the pitch every game, and he dictates the play. And it's interesting, where he's been playing centre midfield with Garvin recently, it's Boateng who dictates the game, not Garvin. It's Boateng who demands the ball. Even when you've got... we had an experienced defence playing in one game, and McCarthy, Hangeland and Mariappa were playing along the back four with Egbo. They were giving the ball to, every time they won the ball, they were giving it to Boateng to start the play. They weren't giving it to Garvan, and Garvan was almost playing second fiddle to Boateng, was happily giving him the ball, and he was just driving that team forward. So I think he's also grown up as a man in the last year or so. He struggled on his loan, I think he was at Crawley or somewhere. Yeah. He struggled, started games, came off at half time, and I think that was a little bit too much too soon for him from a maturity standpoint.
It's League One, there's still reasonable
decent standard, but I think they said he was a bit young for his age, but I think now he's matured physically, mentally and his game style, and I think if we were in the Championship next season, not a Premier Club, he wouldn't be far off starting in midfield if we were playing a three-man centre midfield like we've got now. He'd be up for winning one of those places. So rather than waste time again in the under-21s next year, if a season-long loan to a Championship club would do him and the club good, and maybe the season after he's pushing for our first team.
He was on the bench for that Southampton game. So was Jake Gray. What for me, another one of these players that everyone seems to completely rave about. I spoke to someone who said the best youth player that he's seen at Palace. There's something about him for me that I really, really like. But he's not really a traditional youth Palace player, is he? We're used to a pacey out and out winger and Zaha and Scannell and Mose and things like that. But he's the one they're raving about at the moment.
Now I argue he's the one I've argued most about. My friend Matt Woosnam, who you may know, the other who covers Palace. He absolutely loves Jake, and normally on sort of 8 or 9 players out of 10, myself and Matt agree, and he's the one we don't. I think he's decent, was worth a pro deal, but I think he's a long, long way off. And I had a chat with Matt on last Saturday at the under-18 game, and he was sort of starting to come around to my way of thinking. He started to worry about whether Jake will truly make it to the top level or not. And it's, to me, he is Friedman-esque,
right?
And if you put the ball at his feet and let him a space to run, he's one of these players who can almost seem to run with the ball at his feet quicker than he can without the ball.
Right, yeah.
Glides past people like Freeman used to without them putting a boot on them, and can finish neatly. And before you know it, he's beaten 3 men and stuck the ball in the net. But like Freeman, there isn't a lot else to the rest of his game. He's never going to win a header. He's never going to win a tackle. Yeah. He's never going to the best at tracking back. He's never going to offer you a target man playing with his back to goal.
Yeah.
So it's can this day and age, can you be the luxury where you're almost a one-trick pony? If you are a one-trick pony, you've got to be so good at it that you're almost world class at it, or top class like Dougie was for us.
Yeah.
And if you're not exceptional at that one key attribute you have, if you haven't got the other attributes that a lot of footballers got, you're not going to make it. So again, we picked him up from Wycombe when they disbanded their academy, and there was a lot of interest in him, and we gave him a pro deal quite quickly. I don't know if that was part of the deal to land him from Wycombe, that we had to promise him that to stop him going to other clubs, which I suspect it was. But he's not one of these exceptional players for me. He's not one that stood out head and shoulders when I've watched the academy, like Johnny Williams, Sean Scannell, Moses, Klein, currently Mandela Egbo. That he's not one of those. He's one of those you think, he'll get a pro deal, almost certainly. But then 50% of those who get a pro deal at 17 are out of the professional game by the time they're 20. And he's one of those where I was sure he'd get a pro deal, but it was touch and go whether he's going to be in the professional game or out by the time he's 20.
Was it Cheltenham, wasn't he? I think this season he spent a bit of
He did spend, and they played him wide, and he started a few games and then was...
So is he central striker then?
He can't... Again, it's where do you play him? His ideal position is behind a central striker.
Right.
Yeah, with sort of like the Freeman role. Freeman, just playing off a bigger man,
yeah.
perhaps.
But in the modern day, you don't really get that anymore. No. When's the last time you get a big guy and a small guy out front?
It's almost like the Shamak role for the first team. Yeah. But Shamak is quite good at tracking back and helping out the midfield, and he runs everything. Whereas Jake I think, will struggle with that side of the game. We'll probably openly admit it. It's not his strength.
Yeah.
And it's just a very, you know, as I said, you have to be so good at that one key attribute if you're going to get in the team almost solely on the strength of that key attribute. And if you can't, you know, are you just going to be a flair friendly player that doesn't really make it at the sort of top 2 leagues perhaps? So I say the jury's out on him. He's still got time, but I do worry about whether he's one of those lads who might not make it still, even though he's got a pro deal.
Right, and Keshi Anderson, one we've managed to pick up this season, I think he scored a hat-trick against us, was it? And then begged Gary Issett for a deal or something. Oh, it's something along those lines. I don't know the full story, but is it just a fairy tale, or you know, has the guy got potential? Really?
I like Keshi. I think he scored a hat-trick in 6 minutes. He came on a sub, and
In
then
Millwall,
for Brentford,
right.
and Gary approached him in the car park and
Right.
said, well, "What did Brentford say to you after the game?" Because he was on trial for Brentford, and he said they didn't say anything to me. And within a few days, we'd signed him up because Brentford didn't show any interest. So I saw his debut when he came on for the under-21s and scored with almost his 3rd or 4th touch. There is a little bit about him in that he reminds me a little bit of an Ian Wright in that he can do most things. He's not a one-trick pony like we've discussed with some of the other players. He can dribble past people, he can hold the ball up with his back to goal, he can score goals, and he's a clever passer, and he works, and he's not frightened of the physical side of the game. So having said all that, saying that he can do everything, it's a big jump from doing that at the level he was doing it, right up to the top level. And until the last couple of games, I think they've been quite cleverly introducing him gradually, been sub the under-21s and coming on with 20-25 minutes to go. Yeah. And he looked sharp when he came on and didn't look out of sorts at that level. But and now they've started in the last couple of games, and I've seen them, and he doesn't look quite as comfortable having to play the full 90 minutes. So I think it's going to be like with Appiah. It's not going to be a 5 minutes overnight story like it almost was with Ian Wright. It's going to be a long road, and fans are going to have to be patient with him, and there's going to be loans, and he's going to have to start at a relatively lower loan level, maybe conference like Appiah did, and work his way up the leagues. But there is that spark. I can see why Gary Issett signing, that spark of something that that little bit of dynamite or eye candy that you think he's got something that the average player hasn't. So there is something there, but it's just a big jump, isn't it, to get from where he was to where we'd all like him to be.
People haven't really seen a lot of him. Can you tell us what's he like? What's his build? What's his style?
Now, a lot of people watching him get confused with him and Alassani. He's a slightly taller version of Alassani, with a similar hairstyle. So they do get confused. He's very average. He's probably like 5'10", average build, average height, average strength. But he's got that little bit of skill, and he's not one of these players that only shows the skill out on the wing, where they're relatively safe in terms of you've got one man on you, you can see the tackles coming. He's quite physically committed and brave in that he'll do the things that wingers do, but do them in the middle of the opposition half where you've got 3 people snapping at you, and he's not frightened to dribble past people. He makes clever runs. That's the one thing I spotted in his debut in the first 20 minutes, was he's got a maturity beyond his years about the clever diagonal and the timing of his runs, which I think is something you can't always teach a centre forward.
No, I think you're kind of born with that.
You're born with that. And he also has a bit of speed. So he's got almost a bit of everything there. He's not outstanding at any one thing. Like, he's not going to win headers like a centre-back does playing centre-forward, and he's not going to outpace people like Ian Wright used to. He's not quite that quick. Yeah. But he's just got a bit of everything. He's got an all-round game, and he's clever. So ultimately, maybe he could grow up to be a younger, more mobile, quicker version of Glenn Murray.
Oh, right.
In terms of, well, Murray's not the biggest, but he wins headers. Murray makes clever runs. Murray can hold the ball up. Murray can finish. He just doesn't have that yard of pace, which maybe, I don't know, maybe he's never had, or maybe it's only because he came to us late. But Anderson I like, and there's definitely something for them to work with, a little bit of stardust. Yeah,
and we I'm going to try and pronounce this name, and you probably know I'm going to say already. We signed the guy from Manchester City, Adebayo, what's what his name is?
Fizz, Adebayo or something. I struggle with that.
We'll call him Fizz then. We'll call him Fizz. Yeah. He got released by City, and then we picked him up. Has he played much for the under-21s? Or
He has. He only qualified for the under-21s. He's too old for the 18s. And again, he starts some games and he stub others. He's been stubbed more often than not recently, which I guess I'm guessing we probably gave him a deal at the end of the season. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's released at the end of the season. I don't think he's going to sort of trouble the first team. He's one of these players that's maybe going to bounce around like Jason Banton did.
Yeah.
We give him a short-term deal, and before you know it, he was playing at Plymouth. I think Banton doesn't get a start for Plymouth. Now, some weeks he doesn't even make the bench. And he's probably going to be one of those players at best. And I've heard this will be quite a big overhaul of the under 21s this year. There's a lot of players that have contract will be leaving. I think the club have already told the players a few weeks ago they normally do it this time of year. So you wouldn't be surprised to see Chambers go and Carl De Silva and Morgan Ferrier, Fizz go, and maybe one or two of the others. So I think we've got, from having quite not having a great crop for the last 3 years coming through the academy, we've got a really good bunch of 16-year-olds at the moment, the best we've had probably for sort of 8-9 years. They're really excited about, and you could tell they're really excited about them because the lads aren't allowed to sign their pro deals till they're 17. A lot of them, they'll wait until the end of their second year at under 18 level, so they'll sign their pro deal when they're 18, or they'll be told they're being released, they'll get called in on the same day. But the ones they're really hopeful of, they sign their pro deal on their 17th birthday. The deal's agreed, it's all done, just waiting for the clock to tick. And there's a picture of them on their 17th birthday with them, holding the shirt, and they've done that with 4 or 5 of the lads, I think now. So they're really hopeful. There's 4 or 5, 6 maybe, who are around the 16, just 17 mark. That you'd be surprised at least half of them don't make our first team, even if we're in the Premier.
That Southampton game, going back to there, where we had a bit of a striker crisis. We obviously had Jake Gray on the bench, but in terms of strikers, which one did you think was going to sort of be closest to the first team right now? Because we mentioned Anderson, Ferrier, and Fizz, shall we call him? Which one of those?
I think they're all going to be overtaken by the lad they've already given a pro deal in the under 18s at the moment. He's 17, I think, coming on 18, but he's filled out now. He's starting to get the physique of a man, and he's the quickest player we've had since Scannell before his injuries. He can. I think I went to one game where the opposition were referring to him as the road runner.
Right.
Ben put 2 men on him, and he's a guy called Corey Andrews, and he is so quick, so physical, really good finisher. Holds the ball up. He can hold the ball up as well as with his back to goal, and he can dribble past people and leave them for dead. So I think we haven't got an outstanding forward in that bunch you mentioned that are on the sort of fringes of the under-21s first team. And I think this lad, within a year, he'll be ahead of all of them. And I think he'll probably be training with the first team within a year and will be on the fringes. Might be one of those lads that makes the first team bench when he's 18, right. And will come on, if we're chasing the game. So I think Corey Andrews will go past all of them.
And we spoke about Carl De Silva there potentially sort of struggling to get a contract. He played loads under Friedman, I remember. And then I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he picked up injury after injury. I heard that he was ill at some point. And now he's actually doing really well for the under 21s by the sounds of it. He seems to be popping up with goals now and then. Again, what sort of stopped his career kind of progression?
I think you've mentioned it, illnesses and injuries. And he's been doing okay for the 21s, but as I mentioned, the 21s isn't as good as going out on loan, and he's just been doing okay. If you're going to stay on now, you need to be outstanding in the under 21s. We're putting our best 17-year-olds in the under 21s, and there's lads now who are jumping ahead of him who are 17 or 18, which is a real shame because unlike most of the players in our academy who seem to support Arsenal and Liverpool and Chelsea, he's one of the few that support Palace, and he goes to all the games. I think his family is Palace fans. And it'll be so nice to have a Palace fan coming through to play for the club. But I'm fairly certain he won't be with us next season.
What sort of level do you think he can get to then?
If he can stay injury-free, a lot of our lads who seem to sort of not make it at Palace, they seem to end up playing at best Conference South. There's a few sort of like your Bromley and your Eastbourne. A lot of them play Ryman. And so I could see him make a career down that level probably, where you probably need to work as well to make a living. I think he might struggle to get a gig in the Football League, sadly.
And we picked up, I think, in the summer, a guy called Sam Magri, who got him from Queen's Park Rangers. He was raved about when he was at Portsmouth, but he went to QPR, and as it being Harry Redknapp, you have no chance of ever getting a career unless you're, Peter Crouch or Jermaine Defoe. He seems okay.
Yeah, he seems okay. And initially when they played him, I think he described himself as a centre-back, but we had quite a few centre-backs in the under-21, so he was either sub or he was playing full-back. And when I saw him at full-back a few times, pre-season and in the under-21s, it was just okay. And as I said, you need to be better than okay
Yeah.
under 21s if you're going to make it. But recently he's got a chance since Chambers has gone out on loan and Innes has gone out and McCarthy's gone out on loan because McCarthy had been playing with the under 21s. He's actually been playing at centre back, and I've been impressed with him the last few games. He's looked really good.
He's one I could see maybe
Yeah.
playing Football League, maybe League
Definitely,
2. I think.
and I think he's done enough. I'm not sure when his contract's up, but he's done enough.
It's at the end of the season, I think.
I would hope they'll give him a contract to next season to let him have another year developing the under 21s at
Might be
centre
nice
back.
to play him a few bit and then loan him out and see how
Yeah.
he copes out on loan.
Yeah, I quite like him. There's something about him, and I think he's, as I say, he's doing enough at the under 21 level to justify another chance for another full season.
And so you go and watch them all the time. Who now stands out? Because a lot of people talk about Egbo and his ability, but for you, who's that one that you think
They've got
he's
four,
got the chance?
They've got four or five they're really excited about at the moment. Really excited. I can see why they are. They've got a young Aussie keeper called Ollie Payne, who's 17, and he was in big demand when he came over, and his whole family have moved over to support him. His dad comes, his mum comes, and his sister comes, and they've moved to Bromley to give him a chance of his career. And he is an outstanding keeper. There's a lot of interest from other clubs, and I think Palace gave him a pro deal immediately, which is a big indicator of how much. And they've released the other under-18s keeper who was ahead of him, Brad Cummins, I think, who started the season, has just been told that he's being released at the end of the year. And his dad made me laugh and said that in Australia he deliberately made sure he played for the worst team in the boys' league. And they let in 124 goals, but without his son, he said it would have been about 250. And they're really excited about him. So we've got a keeper now who's got a chance. I think he was on the bench for the under-21s today. They've got Egbo's the best prospect we've had for 3 or 4 years for our academy, but it doesn't look like he'll be with us sadly next season. I don't think they've been able to arrange a deal, and he's now closer to 18 than 17. He's one of those lads that if they'd done a deal, it would have been trumpeted on his 17th birthday, and you're hearing rumours that relations between him and the club might not be the best, and that his agent is asking for X and the club's only allowed to pay Y. And I'm sure he'll have lots of offers from almost every other club. And I'm not really surprised. I can see his offer going two ways. Either he's going to join a really big club, which is paying $5 or $6 a week for 17-year-olds, like your Chelsea's do, or he's going to join a smaller club that's in the Championship who are guaranteeing him next year first-team football. And which Palace can't do either. We can't guarantee a youngster first-team football, and we can't pay $6 a week. So I think we're between the 11 deep blue sea. They've got a young midfielder called Michael Phillips who scored about 15 goals, and he was captain of under-16s last year. Played centre back to start with. Now he's midfield, and he is the perfect modern footballer. Big, strong, wings headers, box to box, as fit as you like, good with the ball at his feet, can finish, can get back and go into the hardest tackles you've seen. He's sort of like, from a young age, he can combine the sort of defensive ability of your Jedi with almost your attacking ability of a Shamak almost. If he keeps developing, he almost combines the best of two, but only as a 17-year-old, so a long way to do that first. But he's a modern prototype player that every club would just love to have, that can do everything in midfield. And they've also got, Corey Andrews, the centre forward who I've mentioned. And they've recently signed Jacob Berkeley Ajipong, who I think his parents were in the Olympics for Great Britain, so he comes from great stock. His father was a triple jumper, I think his mother was a long jumper. And he's an athlete, and he's also got all the skills. So I think those are the ones they're really excited about, and there's a few others. Out of them, Egbo was probably the best. He was ahead because they pushed him ahead. He's played for England. He was captain of the under-21s at 17, but he seems to maybe not be with us. So I'd say probably at the moment, maybe Michael Phillips, the midfield lad, will be the most exciting prospect. They've got old Corey Andrews, the centre forward.
And you say you've been going for about 10 years now to see the youth games. Who is the one that has stood out for you? Out of every single one that you've seen over the last 10 years, who's the one?
Easy
Who's
question.
the one?
The one who was absolutely miles ahead of everyone, every team we've played. And this is going back to the years when we weren't Category 2, when it was organised regionally. So when I first started going, we weren't in sort of the grading by category. So we used to play all the top academies. West Ham, when they had the era of the Ferdinands and the Joe Coles, the Southampton Academy, which is excellent. Fulham were winning everything. Chelsea, the Arsenals when they had the Jack Wilshires, and we used to compete and often beat these clubs. And there was one reason: Victor Moses was just head and shoulders above every player from every team we ever used to play against, including our own. he would almost be too easy for him.
Was that based on ability or just
ability,
power?
ability and a little bit of power. He's never the tallest.
Yeah.
He was quite squat and strong, but it was ability. The ability was out of this world. It would almost be too easy for him. He'd almost score 2 or 3 goals and then just amuse himself doing ever more outrageous tricks, even against top class opponents. I remember Liverpool came down one year. And it was quite funny because the Palace youth team reflects our multicultural society in the Croydon area. So we probably had a very multicultural team, and Liverpool were like 11 white skinheads who'd never seen a ray of sunlight in their lives. And and Moses, we won 4-0, and Moses just ripped them apart. And I think the Liverpool team hadn't lost for 6 months, and they couldn't believe how good he was. But he's one of those players who I think, because of his personal tragedy of the life he's been through and losing his parents so young, he's one of those where football's never been the be all and end all to him, you can tell. So I think he's never even come close to fulfilling his full potential, because to him, understandably, what he's been through, football, there are bigger things than football. Whereas most of the other lads who come through, football is their be all and end all, and they give everything. It's life, and they strain every sinew every day to be the best they possibly. Victor never had to. One, because his natural ability was good enough to take him to quite a high level. But I think if he ever put his mind to it and wanted to be as good as he could be, he wouldn't be playing for Stoke. He'd be back playing at one of the top clubs. He was exceptional. But then Scannell was out of this world as well. Until he got his injuries, I think he was so quick, and his injuries just made him lose a few yards of pace. He's still quick, but not as quick as he was, which I think is the difference between why he's now a Championship player and not a Premiership player.
Could you see Moses playing for Palace again one day?
I could. I know it's been 1 or 2 columnists have suggested that. I could see him playing for Palace. He's one of these players who was comfortable in his own environment. He went to the Whitgift School, didn't he, on a scholarship. And I think he took them to the national title, and they won the final 5-0, and he scored all 5.
Yeah.
And I think he's another one like Zaha, who can be a little bit of a fish out of water if they're away from their surroundings and the comforts. And I could see him coming back to Palace one day and being a big player. If we were, say, to lose Balassi, say Balassi keeps suddenly adds an end product, adds goals to his account, then if he does, that he outgrows, the minute Balassi scores 15 goals a season, he outgrows Palace and he goes to a Liverpool or someone. If he does, then my replacement for Balassi, I'd love Moses to come back. He's superb. On the other scale, it's also interesting that there's one, the lads that I was absolutely sure, 9 times out of 10 you're right, you can tell. Anyone who's been to a lot of games, you can tell, even the young lads, so-and-so's probably going to make it, so-and-so's not. But 1 or 2 out of 10 you get wrong. And there was a lad called Michael Abner, I was absolutely convinced was going to be top class. He was so good that Klein couldn't play right back. Abner played right back, Klein was stuck out on the left back because Abner was rated so highly. And he was the quickest player I've ever seen. He had a nasty streak in him, which you don't often see in 18-year-olds, but you love to see. And he had plenty to say for himself. He'd try and referee the game as well, and he'd be winding up the oppo. And his one of his players was so good, he'd almost laugh as he went past the oppo. And some days he actually did. And for some reason, it never quite happened for him. He got a pro deal, stayed on under 21s, flitted around. He's been playing in Iceland. I think he's playing for Dulwich Hamlet at the moment, Michael Abner. But I was absolutely sure he was going to be top class, and as sure as I was with Moses was. But it's never worked for him. He makes a bit of money playing around local non-league clubs, and I think he plays in Iceland during their professional or semi-professional season, but never made it.
Did you ever see Bostock play?
I saw Bostock a lot, was never impressed.
Really?
He was a poor man's Ray Wilkins to me. Had all the style, neat and tidy, would take the ball off the back 4, demand it, but where it's easy, where you've got the ball in your own half and you're not being pressed,
you're not stressed.
You pick the ball off your centre back, you run forward 5 yards, you slip it out to the left back, the left back slips it back to you, you slip it out to the right back, the right back slips it back. All looks really neat and tidy, but I don't remember seeing him create a goal or goes past people, go past. And I couldn't believe all the hype, to be honest. And I hate to be proved right, because I think it made us look fools that he hasn't made it. We kicked up such a fuss when Tottenham signed him that 800,000 wasn't enough.
That's a good little profit now, really.
Yeah, it's a good profit now, but it just means we're like the boy who cried wolf. Because if we were to lose another player like that and we kick up and say, oh, that player's going to be the next bee's knees, we demand loads. Not that system works now. They're going to laugh at us and say, we said that about Bostock, whereas you're playing now Belgium 2nd Division.